Hi there, and welcome to day 5. This is the final day of the 5 Days to Practice Mastery course. Of course, there are the bonuses still to come, the foot technique and hand technique sections. But for today, we are going to round up everything that we've done by talking about transitioning from this to the stage. So I'm just going to get my notes in front of me so I don't leave anything out. I suspect if you've been playing for any amount of time and you've started to gig or anything like that, that you have come across this problem where there are things that you can play in the practice room that when it comes to doing them on stage just isn't happening. I remember an interesting interview with Chris Adler from Lamb of God, where he was talking about his technique and how he would practice. So one of the things he's famous for is these kind of broken, I really like the stuff, single stroke threes that he was playing, and he would say that he could practice heels down. But when he came to playing live, the adrenaline was just so much that he actually ended up playing kind of a heel toe pattern. So his technique altered completely to something he wasn't practicing when he played live. So the environment of the stage produces a lot of additional stressors that aren't there when you practice. And what we're going to talk about today is how you manage those stresses, because one of my old teachers, a gentleman called Neil Huxtable, who I studied with for quite a few years in Wembley in North London, he was a sort of jazz Latin specialist, very good drummer. He used to play with Doctor and the Medics. He was a big session drummer in the 80s in the UK. And he said you play at a recording and you get through a gig. Which really stuck with me, because gigs are never perfect. They never go completely right, except once in a blue moon. Okay, there are so many variables and factors to deal with that it's an impossible expectation that you will play exactly the same on stage as you will in the practice room. You've probably, if you've played gigs, had the experience where you play a gig and you think you've played absolutely rubbish and the audience think it's the greatest thing ever. And then you get the reverse where you think you've played really well and there's not a peep from them. So you have the audience's perception to deal with. I'll touch on this to do with speed in a little while, actually, because speed and perception in music is a very interesting one. But you get through a gig. That's the first thing I want you to understand. You get through it. You get through it. And this comes back to this idea of, enjoyment performance theory. If you commit to enjoying the gig for the sake of doing the gig and not worrying about, how well you play, quote unquote, rather than just enjoying what you're doing, you will play better. That's something to understand. Just on a slight tangent here, as I want to do, I mentioned sort of tracking progress, and in the bonus sections I'll talk about, little practice charts and things like that. But generally, you want to track your progress by how much fun you're having. Okay? I think that's really important, and I may well shoot an extra video on this because I think it's so important. People get obsessed with what speed am I playing at, all of this. Is it fun? Are you enjoying it? Hopefully you've got from the first 4 parts of this that you're setting yourself up for something you're going to do for a long time, so you better like it. Especially in the first section where you pick the drummers you want to play like. These are the people, this is what you want to do. This is something for fun. It's not to be measured by any kind of standard of expertise or whatever. It's art. You're supposed to enjoy it. And with that in mind, if you remember that you get through a gig, that's it, and that your perception of how well you're playing is completely divorced from everybody else's. So your perception of how well you're playing is wrong. Basically, you bring too much to the table. You have no way of telling how well you're doing, other than how much you're enjoying it. Now, this reminds me of when I was training as a therapist. I trained as a hypnotherapist as well as a cognitive behavioral therapist. My supervisor. So one of the things you have to do in that school. I went to a school in Imperial College in London for 2 years to train. And I'm going to relate this to a story as to when I was at MI as well, and kind of give you an idea of how the two things relate. You have to stand up in front of the class of 50 people and hypnotize them all. You have to run a hypnotic protocol that you would use in a therapy session to 50 people who know what you're doing, as well as the tutors who are in the room marking you, assessing what you're doing, basically. And she said, and this really stuck with me, you are not capable of judging your own work, so don't bother. And that really stuck with me, and that was a game-changing moment. You are not capable of judging your own work. It's one of the things that I found when I post videos on social media. I used to really worry about getting it perfect, and now I just do it. It's, you know, I put it out there, and it is what it is. And actually, some of the videos that I've thought wouldn't do very well have done amazingly, and some of the videos that I've thought would be perfect have done really well. You just can't, have done really badly. You can't tell. You are not capable of judging your own work. You can technically judge where you're at. You can say, okay, I'm this fast, but that's about it. You know, this is an art form. It's a personal thing. So just because somebody's amazing doesn't mean everybody likes them. So, for example, in metal, George Callias is a hugely popular drummer. Now, I think his teaching material is very good, but it's not really to my taste. I'm more of the Dave Lombardo, Pete Sandoval, old school guys. I find the same thing with Derek Roddy. I love his teaching material, but it's not really my thing. So you can appreciate how good somebody is and not, you know, not really dig it. Whereas I really like guys like Virgil Donati and Thomas Lang. And you find some guys say, well, you know, they play too many notes or whatever. It's not, you can't, you know, you either like it or you don't, and that's fine. I appreciate all of them. I think they're incredible players. I also like, you know, Steve Gadd. I think is an amazing player. Doesn't really do anything for me. Vinny Colaiuta, on the other hand, does. So, you know, you liking it, you know, has no bearing on how good they are or whatever, because it's art. They could be the most, Virgil is probably the most technically advanced drummer alive, and he leaves some people cold, whereas I just think it's the most fantastic thing ever. You know, same thing with Meshuggah. Some people say it's just technical nonsense and it's cold math metal. Other people just really dig it and think it's incredible. We all know secretly that the people who don't like it are wrong, but that's just between you and me. So knowing your preferences, as we dealt with in the first session, is a really, really good idea, because it ties into this idea that you have to know what you enjoy doing, what your strengths are, and play to them. And it makes it a lot easier when you go and play live, when you realize, and also realizing that you can't judge how good you are. You've got no, the word's kind of irrelevant, to be honest. Good, bad. It's Mike Johnston, he's quite a famous drum teacher who runs Mike's Drum Lessons, and he talks about drumming being a line like this, and here's the beginning, and here's, you know, the day you stop drumming, probably because you drop dead. And all of us are somewhere along that line. This end isn't better than this end. It's just further down the line. And if you think of it, this isn't good and this isn't bad, it's just you're further along the journey, because there's so much to this, and it's so difficult, and it takes so much time and dedication, and it's so much fun, and there's so many variations that you can't say that, you know, saying one person's better than the other is irrelevant. I've learned some really cool things from some 7-year-old beginners that I've taught, who they just come up with stuff that I think, oh, that's really cool. And, you know, so I steal ideas from 7-year-olds, so you've got nothing to worry about. So you get through a gig and you have no way of judging the quality or judging whether your own work is good or not. So don't try. When you play on the gig, go into it with the idea that you are going to enjoy the experience, whatever it is. So this lets go of expectation. Now, we talked about this before, this idea that you're not up to scratch or you're not where you should be. You don't have the ability to judge where you should be. You are where you are. And all that happens if you try and judge your own work and expect certain things of yourself is that you'll hate gigging. Now, I play with a death metal band called Spearhead, and we've done some pretty good gigs. We've played with bands like Mystifier, Angel Corpse, and one of the shows last year when we played with Angel Corpse, I missed a verse out of a song. I just completely forgot it. The band looked a bit panicked. Everybody kept going, and we eventually came back in. Now, 10 years ago, I would have spent hours after that dissecting why I'd gone wrong. And I would have come away from that hating it. Really, really hating it. Just thinking, God, what's the point? And that's what I used to think. I used to dissect what I was doing, post-mortem, you know, what mistakes did I make? How can I stop it next time? Which is daft, really, because you can't. You're going to make mistakes. You're human. Your brain has got a lot of stuff going on, as we've talked about before. It's got a limited amount of power. And when you're in the practice room, this is you, the pads, or the kit, and the TV, or the metronome, or whatever. So it's there. There's no pressure. When you're playing live, there's the audience. There's, you know, the fact that you can't hear what the hell's going on. The monitoring's not great. You know, amps blow up. We've played a gig where the guitarist has arrived there, plugged his amp in, and this was quite a big show with, I think it was with Eternus, and he plugged his amp in, and it just died on stage. So all these things are going wrong all the time. And a long time ago, I would have really panicked about it because I was trying to be perfect. This time, I thought, oh, well, you know, we sort of had a laugh about it afterwards, and then I looked at what did I think went right. And did I enjoy playing it? And the energy of the gig was amazing. You know, the band were really playing well. And except for this one mistake, it was fantastic. And the audience didn't notice because people don't know what you're doing. That's the third thing I want you to remember. They have no idea. People who aren't musicians aren't listening to the notes you're playing. They're listening to the vibe you're producing. That's it. They kind of listen to the outside of the music, whereas we as musicians are listening to the inside. We analyze technique and we look at all of these intricate bits and pieces, you know. They don't know. So, for example, if I play, you know, something like this, let's see. Whether that does anything for you is completely out of my hands. I really like those kind of phrases, those kind of furious paradiddle type fusion phrases. The most a non-musician is going to pick up from that, I would think, is just it's fast and quite intense. Now, either they like fast and intense or they don't. Most people will say, well, that's very clever, but whether they like it or not, you know, I've got no way of telling. I like it, so I do it. That's how I play. I like to play really weird, complicated, fast things because that's what does it for me. And I find if I enjoy it, I project better and it's more likely that the audience will enjoy it. And this all, again, ties back into enjoyment performance theory. If you like what you're playing, that's enough. So, because you will come across, you know, all kinds of groups of people who will tell you, well, you shouldn't do this and you mustn't do that and you shouldn't play like this and you shouldn't do that. Bullshit. Just play how you want to play. Now, I'm going off on a slight tangent here, but again, I think it's important. Whether you thought that was any good, or whether you liked what I just played there is a completely subjective thing. I have no control over it. I hope you did, but if you didn't, so what? So if you go into the gig with no expectation and commit consciously to enjoying it, and I mean say to yourself out loud, I'm going to enjoy this. You know, that's it. I'm going to enjoy this. You'll have a much better time. Now, this reminds me of another. There's going to be a lot of anecdotes today, but I think they're quite useful to illustrate the point. A couple of years ago, I auditioned for a band called Bloodshot Dawn, who are sort of moderately well-known death metal band in the UK. And I was given a list of 3 songs to learn, and I noticed after about a week I hadn't looked at them. I hadn't touched them at all. And I sat down and I thought, why haven't you done that? That's really weird. Why haven't you started learning them? And then this thought came into my head, well, you're not going to get the gig, are you? And that was a big turning point for me. I noticed, remember I talked about being aware of what you're thinking? I'm not going to get the gig, so what's the point? And I thought, well, that's daft. I might not. And so I changed my approach and I said, well, I'm just going to do this for the experience. I'm going to go along, I'm going to meet these guys, I'm going to play some death metal, and I'm going to have a good time. And I'm not going to worry about whether I get it or not. And I went, and it was a really fun audition. And I didn't get it in the end. And I think the guy they got was probably better for what they were after. But afterwards, I emailed the singer, Josh, and said to him, I had a really good time. Could you recommend, I'm looking for a band. Could you recommend anybody? He put a post on his wall praising me. So just because I didn't get it doesn't mean I wasn't any good. Saying I was really good. Bands. And I got about 10 bands approach me. There's not that many death metal drummers in the UK. And I eventually ended up joining Spearhead, which for me was a much more suitable, it's more my style. They're kind of old school Angel Corpse, Morbid Angel. That's kind of where I come from. So, so even because I could have assumed that I didn't get it because I wasn't any good, but it was nothing to do with it. There's various reasons why you don't get things, but it was the moment I committed to I'm just going to do this. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to go along. I'm going to learn the tunes. I'm going to meet these guys, and it was really cool. And they were nice guys, and it was a great day. And I felt like I learned a lot just by learning the songs. So committing to enjoying things makes it easier on yourself, but it also makes the experience better for everybody else. And I think if I'd gone in nervous, I would have overplayed and all of those things. So when it comes to actually doing the gig, you're probably going to be playing on somebody else's drum kit a lot of the time. And gigging drummers find out fairly quickly to let go of the idea of having the perfect setup because it just isn't there. So 2 tips for you on that score. The first one is a psychological tip. And this is extremely important. Play within your limits. And I mean well within your limits. Okay? If you're playing relatively new with a band and you're not quite sure about all the sections of the songs, don't try and do anything clever and don't overplay. Okay? So if there are transitions that you're not sure about, so for example, and the most common one, when you're on a strange setup, so I like to do, I can't really demonstrate it very easily here, but I'll do it between my pad and my leg. Like I do a lot of fills and threes. Now, which is quite awkward to do here, like that. And I like to do them quite quickly, sort of that sort of speed around the toms. So you can imagine that becomes quite difficult to do when I'm on a kit that isn't mine because I have my toms in front of me. Some toms are over here to the side. Some, I'm left-handed and I have to play on right-handed kits sometimes. So I can play like that. And for convenience's sake, I have to move the ride cymbal over and play open-handed. So I don't try and do all my clever stuff. I stay well within my limits. Sometimes I barely play any fills at all. And if I do play fills, instead of rolling around the drum set, I don't know, if I'm playing like a thrashy song. And I'll do it between my... I'll just do it on the snare drum between my hands and feet, for example, so I can, because I can definitely do that. I know that that's well within my capability. moving around the drum set very, very quickly. But when you do threes, there's a lot of arm movement. It's not like fours is relatively straightforward, where threes goes in diagonals. If I'm on a kit that is strange, excuse me, and that I'm not used to, and I try and do the things that I can do in the practice room exactly, I'm probably going to make a mistake. And so I stick, generally as a rule, until I warm up or until my mind relaxes, to playing everything: ride cymbal, hi-hat, snare, and bass. Your band will thank you more if you stay in time and play accurately phrased fills rather than overreach. You'll sound better. You'll think it's too simple. The audience don't know. So remember, you don't have any way of judging. This is a good thing to remember when you're going into the recording studio as well and you get red light fever. And that red light comes on, you're like, oh my God, I'm recording. Oh my God, everybody's looking at me. Oh my God, what do I do? Keep it simple. Snare drum. Like that. Okay. So I can play that stuff around the drum set, but if I'm on a strange kit, I stick with what's really easy to reach. When you set up, worry about those drums: bass drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. Get them within reach, and the ride cymbal. Everything else doesn't matter. Even if you never hit the other drums, it doesn't matter. I've played thrash metal gigs on a three-piece: snare drum, floor tom, bass drum. That's it. Because ultimately, again, you're there to get through it. It's not a test of perfection. And particularly in the studio, stick well within your comfort zone, physically as well as mentally. Don't overreach. Don't try and pull out your hardest lick. Remember, as I talked about, the day you learn something to the day you can do it is about 6 months. The day you can do it to the day you can perform it is about a year. I would say from the day you can perform it to the day you can record it is probably another year. It needs to be automatic, absolutely automatic. Remember the neural superhighway, where I can play this stuff and switch between singles, doubles, and paradiddles, right hand lead. Now this has taken years of practice, okay, to be able to do that. So when I'm in a recording situation, it's there. If I've got to do a drum solo in my fusion band, I make life very easy for myself, and I generally start the solo on the snare drum and see how I feel. And if I'm a bit tense, I just stay there. So you make it easy for yourself. Don't overreach. Don't push outside of your comfort zone. Your band will thank you for it. You'll sound better. The experience will be more fun. And you'd be surprised. The audience will think you sound amazing. And so that's physically how you make it easier for yourself. You play well within your comfort zone. All the top guys do it. When I had lessons with Thomas Lang, he would talk about this a lot, and that guy's got technique coming out of his ears. Play within your comfort zone. It's not a contest. The pushing your limits thing, unless you're playing jazz fusion or something where you're meant to try to push stuff, really is frustration that you're not good enough. You're trying to kind of demonstrate to people most of the time. That's what that is. So commit to enjoying it and make it easy for yourself to do. And then the transference of what you're doing on the pad and in the practice room will be much smoother to the chaotic environment of playing on the stage, where you can't hear anything, where you're being watched. There's a time limit, the guy's yelling at you to set up quickly, whatever. Or you're in the studio and you've got to get it right because you're on a timer. One of the great things about home studios now, especially for drummers with programs like Reaper, is they have a crossfade function on them, which means we can do drop-ins like guitarists. Yay! If you're recording, make it easy for yourself. Don't try and do it in one take. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, just do it in, I do most things in several takes, and a lot of guys do. There are some guys who can do things in one take, but if you have to do, the verse, then the chorus, then the verse, that's fine. That's normal. Everybody does it. Okay, unless you are Virgil or Thomas Lang, and even Virgil, those guys do drop-ins. Everybody does it. Why make it hard? It's not a test. Make it easy for yourself. So if the producer says, you know, we can do drop-ins and you would feel more comfortable doing that, then you do it. When I recorded with Spearhead, they were giving me new drum parts as we were going. So I had to do it in sections, and it was great fun. It was easy. I was allowed to be a bit more creative. So, you know, guitarists and bass players have been doing it for years. Take advantage of the technology. It's not, you know, it's not cheating. It's just making your life easier. So, likewise, if you like to do it in one take and you're happy with that, go for it. If you wish to do it in one take, commit to enjoying the take and have no expectations. If you make a mistake, just keep going, finish, go back and do it again. Because when you listen back, you might find what you thought was a mistake is actually quite good. Sometimes it sounds terrible. Sometimes you could barely notice it because your brain will amplify every mistake you make. And so that's the physical stuff. Psychologically, the issue with expectation and stage fright is that it produces tension. And we've talked about this a little bit when it comes to practice and why we practice slowly. So we know that if slow, controlled practice produces relaxation, and relaxation produces a controlled sound. Controlled repetition produces neural superhighways. Neural superhighways produce speed. Okay, relaxed muscles automatically have endurance, and what we're practicing is relaxing so that it sounds fluid and easy. So when we speed it up, you know, there, it should feel very relaxed and easy, just like I'm bouncing a ball. It takes years and years of constant practice. You know, you'll never reach the end of it. But we know that when you push too hard, you produce a radiation that moves up into your body, which makes you more, so tension produces tension. And that practicing tension over and over again makes you more and more tense. It's a vicious circle. So psychological tension is produced by overload, and I've touched on this before, and I've touched on the idea that it will produce a sensation in your body. So we're now dealing with what is broadly called stage fright or performance anxiety or whatever you want to call it. Don't pathologize it. It's just a term for something everybody gets. Everybody is afraid of being watched by other people. It's just nerve-wracking. There's several reasons for it. One of the more interesting ones, those of you who are into psychology and biology and evolution, those kind of things, is that we are social primates. Being part of the group is very, very important. If you mark yourself out by standing up on stage, for example, you mark yourself out to predators. You know, if you elevate yourself above the rest of them and they're all looking at you, if a predator comes in the room, your brain thinks that you will be noticed first. It's why performance anxiety exists, because you're marking yourself out as different to everybody else, and that's just a bad idea. Well, your animal brain thinks it's a bad idea. Humans are much more like zebra. Zebra's stripes are there not to camouflage them against the background, but to camouflage them against each other, so that the lions can't pick them off. And so by standing on stage, you're marking yourself out. So the lions in your head, will see you, because we evolved 40,000 years ago on the savannah plains in Africa to throw spear at gazelle and run away from lions. And a large part of your brain still thinks that's what you're doing. So if you understand that stage fright is normal, first off, everybody gets it. That bit of it you can't really stop. What you can do is manage it. So what I want you to do here, now this really can only, you have to kind of practice it in real life, okay? When it's happening is I want you to become aware of the sensation your body produces when you experience that stage fright. So people will often say, oh, I get stage fright, I say, well, how do you know? And they kind of look at me blankly, like they don't really know how they're experiencing the stage fright. So I'm going to give you a little anecdote about something I experienced, which I would call the fourth bar panic. Now, I think I've probably talked about this before already, but again, it relates. It's very, very important. When I used to record, I'd be fine until I hit the fourth bar, and then I'd suddenly get this rising sensation I'd make a mistake, and I'd get the thought, oh God, I'm going to cock it up, I'm going to cock it up, and then I would. And it was horrible. It was very, very difficult to overcome. It interfered for a lot of years, and I avoided recording until I learned this technique. Now this technique is physical observation. It's a form of meditation. And I use an app on my iPhone called Headspace, and I'm going to put a link in the workbook for you. Headspace teaches you to basically observe your physical state. That's one of the things that happens in meditation. It's not really about clearing your brain. It's about observing what happens to allow your brain to process it. As we talked about with the physical tension, if you notice where it is, you can let it go much more easily. And you can hold the sticks much more loosely than you think you can. Same thing with psychological tension. And they're actually linked. They produce the same response. So when you experience tension when you're practicing, it's because you're going too fast for your brain. The signal can't be sent quickly enough, so the brain locks up. It's also why your weaker hand, if you're left, if you're right-handed, you're right, if you're left-handed, tends to experience more tension initially. When you're experiencing stage fright, it's the same thing for a slightly different reason, but it produces the same effect. So that anxiety and the expectation of being watched will activate what's called the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system will pump out adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol and prepare you for a fight. So some of the symptoms of this are breathing faster, sweating, increased heart rate, all of these things, okay, that you're probably quite familiar with. I'm going to put a little diagram in the worksheet so you can see exactly what's happening. The problem is when it goes into that mode, everything else becomes secondary because it thinks you're going to die. And so how do we manage it? Well, I want you to notice where you feel the sensation in your body. And you'll notice this at some point when you go on stage. It may be when the first song starts. It may be beforehand. You may experience it quite a long time beforehand and start worrying about it the week before. And I want you just to notice where the sensation is. And as soon as you notice the sensation, just like when we're practicing physically, I want you to take your mind to it and just watch it. Now, you can do this while you're playing. You can just be aware of it. And what this is doing is disconnecting you emotionally from it. So you're observing it like you'd watch, I don't know, a deer in the wild or something. So, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that feeling's there again. Oh, how strange. And this is how I got past that 4-bar panic. Is that I realized that I get this, it's hard to describe, it's kind of a rising tension here. And when it hit here, I'd make a mistake. And as soon as I noticed it, I'd just watch it and go, okay, well, you again, what do you want? What are you doing? And it would sort of go there. As soon as I noticed it, it would go back down again. It's, again, that rule of reversed effect. If you look at an unconscious phenomenon, it tends to dissipate quite quickly. It'll come back. And every time it comes back, you watch it, and every time you watch it, you get a little bit better at it, and it goes away quicker, and it's a virtuous circle. The more you practice observing your state, the easier it becomes to observe your state. And so eventually, it's got to the point now where I don't, I get nerves when I'm playing, but when this comes on, I just look at it and go, oh, it's that again. Not the, oh my God, I'm going to make a mistake, because that's getting involved in it. So by just observing it, and just letting it be there, not trying to get rid of it. Oh, it's that again. Okay, well, whatever. It will dissipate on its own. Now, this is not easy to do. Chances are you'll screw it up a couple of times. Don't worry about that. It's like anything else. It takes a lot of practice, but I think if you want to transfer your skills effectively from the practice room to the stage, this is something you really need to master. And the only drum book I've ever seen that talks about it is Mike Mangini's Rhythm Knowledge, which appears to be out of print at the moment, which is very annoying. That mental preparedness trumps everything else. You can have all the chops in the world. If you're panicked and stressed, you're not going to play well. And so prioritize. The next time you do a gig, prioritize that exercise first. Just take a couple of minutes on your own, sit down somewhere and just scan your body and just notice how you feel. You can close your eyes and do it. If there's space to do it. And this is more important than physically warming up the sticks. Relax your mind, your body will follow, because you warm up when you're on stage pretty quickly. Now, I'm not saying don't warm up, but if you're warming up and panicking, that's pointless. If you're sitting there going, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, I'm going to make mistakes. What's the point? You're better off just sitting there noticing. And you probably experience something in your chest and your solar plexus or in your stomach. You may feel pressure in your head. I don't know. But if you're experiencing any kind of anxiety or stage fright, just sit with it and just let it be there, and it'll go away on its own. Don't try and make it go away. Just watch what it does. Sometimes it'll move. Sometimes it'll just dissipate. Sometimes it'll go sideways. And I would be very interested to know, if you feel comfortable to do so, share it in the comments. Tell me what happens when you do it. Because it's really important. You can practice 9 hours a day, and stage fright will kill you. Kill your performance stone dead. So this mental preparedness, this acceptance that you're going to be anxious, that you're going to commit to enjoying the gig, and that you're just going to observe your state without trying to alter it. Because actually that resisting and fighting it is what makes it worse. I shouldn't be stressed. Oh God, why am I so? And it just goes in a vicious cycle. And I have found that probably the single most useful technique ever in my career. Particularly, it allowed me to record. The fact that I just could observe my worries about making a mistake and just let them go. So I will put a link to, I'm going to recommend that you get the Headspace app, because you can get that. It's fun, not endorsed by them or anything. I don't make any money from them. And they have a free 10-day introduction that you can download to your phone, and it's fantastic. It's really, really good. And there are plenty of meditation apps out there, and I can't recommend it highly enough, because learning to observe your mental and physical state before a show will make the biggest changes you can possibly imagine. Okay, so that wraps up 5 days to practice mastery. This is all introductory stuff. Okay, so learning to be a practice master is a lifelong discipline. It never finishes. I'm sure as I'm going along, I'm going to add bits into this. So keep your eyes open in the group. Keep talking to people here. Post your questions, and don't forget the 2 bonus sections that you can look at, which will be day number 6 and day number 7, where I'm going to look into hand and foot techniques specifically. Just kind of give you some pointers on how I do it. But if you have any questions, anything you want me to add in, anything you don't understand, post it in the group. So I will see you in the group, and that's it for now. Thanks.